So, welcome this afternoon. So, we are the Royal Ballet and Opera Company, and Mark, I'm sure, will tell you a lot more about his role within the company. But just to say, we are one of Europe's busiest theatres. We are home to the Royal Ballet, the Royal Opera, and the orchestra of the Royal Opera House. But we're also home to an army of people that make our shows and make our shows happen, and also broadcast our shows to the world. So we're we're not a receiving house. We are a repertory company, which means that we make all our own work. And there is a circulation of shows on our stage, our main stage, all the time. So we're not like a West End theatre that has one static show at a time. We have a constant cycle of ballet and opera throughout what we call our season, and our season runs from September to sort of mid-July. So the Royal Ballet are in residence. So there might be right now, the stage is turning around. So in the morning every day, there is a rehearsal usually of a full ballet or opera with the set, the lights, everything all there. And then about 2 o'clock, about now, it will start to be winding down. And then an army of people will come onto the stage and they will take everything down, all the lights, all the scenery, and the whole stage moves that set off, and a whole new set moves in, and the lights are re-rigged and the sound people come in and re-mic and prepare for an entirely different performance that will go up this evening. And that happens at least 6 days a week at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden. So it's a really, really busy and exciting place to work. And everybody says it's cliche to us, but everyone says that no 2 days are the same. You just don't know what you'll get, whatever department you work in at the Opera House. And I also mentioned that we make everything ourselves. So all the sets, the costumes, everything down to the shoes, and the jewelry and hats and wigs are all made by craftspeople at our company, either out here where I'm based at the moment, which is our workshops in Thurrock, in Purfleet-on-Thames in Thurrock, where we build all the sets and paint the sets, and then around the building in Covent Garden. We don't realise how much space we take up when you look at it from the outside. There's a warren of different rooms and workshops where people make beautiful things that will appear on the stage. So that gives you an overview of the company. And I'm now going to hand over to Mark to tell you what his role is within all that.
Absolutely. So, my name's Mark. I've been here at the Royal Royal Ballet and Opera at the Royal Opera House. We did change the rebranding, so it's taken a little while to get it, and I'll probably get it wrong a couple of times. But I've been here for 19 years, and my role here is to work with to provide the technical facilities to do the broadcasts that we do, and we do a number of those over the year. We go out live to cinemas, and we've been doing that since about 2008. We do a number of things out to YouTube. We have a program called the Insights program, which is a sort of like a education, learning, and participation type program. We do about 22 of those a year. We have BBC Radio 3 come in and use our facilities, and I'm currently in one of our sound rooms downstairs in the basement at Covent Garden. And we also do a number of other events. We have a schools program called Create Day, so that's coming up later on in the summer, which we'll be filming and will be out live for 6 odd hours during the day. So that's my role. I say I've been here for 19 years. I'll just to give a sort of a background, because I know a lot of you are coming through and starting your careers. I didn't start in sound at all. I actually did electronic engineering. So I worked for a semiconductor manufacturer when I left school. I took a year out before going to a university, worked for a semiconductor manufacturer, working on TV distribution side of things. I did electronics engineering at university, but during my spare time I did sound. I worked for the events team. I worked for various theatre groups and all kinds of bits and pieces. I did project management, I did technical management, I did various bits and pieces. I did festivals, I did all kinds of bits and pieces, and that was really just during my spare time. And the electronics industry went through a big slump when I graduated, which was 2002, very long time ago. I ended up applying for and getting a job with Rambert Dance Company, who are a contemporary dance company based in London. I did touring with them for 3.5 years. and I'd had enough of touring at the end of that. And so a position turned up at the Royal Opera House. I actually applied for the sound engineer's position, but with the experience that I gained from Rambert, where I've been doing quite a lot of video work, I've been doing quite a lot of sort of editing and music editing, all kinds of bits and pieces, recordings. Somebody said, actually, you'd probably fit in quite well with this. And I was very fortunate to be employed along with somebody who'd come from BBC Outside Broadcasts. The opera has just built it's the first generation TV gallery and sound room. And so I started with not a great deal of experience and have built up from there. And I now help run it, run the technical side of the broadcasts. I've mixed operas, I've vision engineered bits and pieces. It's a small team here, so there's only 2 of us who specifically work on the broadcast technical side of things. So my background is more on the sound side of things, but I've had to learn all the vision side of things as well. And we say we've grown from doing very little in 2005 when I first joined to 8 cinema relays, 22 insights, a selection of other events, and 13 Radio 3s a season that we currently do. And a number of those are then post-produced, and we have our own streaming platform. We have a distribution deal with Naxos, who distribute DVDs, Blu-rays, and broadcast distribution out to broadcasters for the stuff that we film from here, the ballets and operas. And the idea today is really just to give you an idea of the kind of process that we go through from taking a show that's been put on stage. Ultimately, on broadcast side, we're here to observe that and broadcast it out to in the case of cinemas, across the whole of Europe live. So what we do, and we've got to work around that crazy schedule that Sarah mentioned earlier. It is mad. There's no 2 ways about it. It is incredibly mad in terms of how busy the building is, and we have to fit around it, and fit around how the shows work as well. We're not unlike maybe there are 1 or 2 other companies that do things. So the National Theatre do a number of these. I think English National Ballet have done some, and a couple of other companies. It is quite expensive, so it does tend to be the bigger companies that do these things. Some companies will do for filming, will do things, will close the auditorium. For us, that's quite expensive. If you're going to close, and you can see in the lovely picture behind Sarah, the auditorium that we have, it's a traditional horseshoe-shaped auditorium, and unfortunately, that wasn't really designed with cameras in mind. So we have to take off if we were to do that, we would have to take an awful lot of seats off sale, and that costs a lot of money. Not only and also the cameras cost a lot of money as well. So we have to be mindful of cost. So we'd always do it with a live audience. So we have to work around that and work around the auditorium availability. And you've got that rehearsal in the morning. You've got the changeover in the afternoon. Sometimes we also have an orchestral rehearsal in the afternoon as well, just to add an extra thing into the mix. So it's a very, very busy environment. But the process that we do, it's quite similar for both the radio and the cinema. Obviously, the cinema we have cameras. We will start the process probably about a year out. So I'm starting to look at our next one, our season for next season in terms of the shows that we're going to be filming, and we're starting discussions with Radio 3 now in terms of what operas they do operas, what operas they want to record and be able to take away to put out on Radio 3. So we start the process now. We start looking at what the shows are going to be, and we'll start work on the schedule. And it's very busy. And we've got to try and fit around what works commercially. Once we've got that in place, we get to, there's some planning and process, and we've done this for a long time. So the nice thing is that we have a sort of a fairly fixed way of working, and we'll work out where we can get in and what we can do in terms of being able to work around the shows and the rehearsals that are going on at the same time. And during the rehearsal process, what we'll try and do is try and get people in to see and work on the shows as much in advance of the thing as we can. So Radio 3 will come in for what we call the final rehearsal, the general rehearsal. And they'll come in and have a listen to it and have an idea of what they will need to do to achieve that. And on the the sort of cinema side or the filming side of things, we'll try and get in a bit earlier. And the reason for this is that cameras don't really see the way that your eye does. Particularly, we still are reliant, the TV technology and the technology that you're looking at the moment on the screen is all based off of CRT tellies, and they can't cope with large amounts of contrast. So the difference between black and white, so we have to work around that. Your eye is an amazing tool. It really can cope with all kinds of stuff, and cameras they can't. That's just how it is, and the display technology can't cope with it. So what we have to do is we have to try and get in early and try and work with our lighting teams and our, even some of the costume teams to actually start looking at how we can gently adapt it for the camera, so it looks good on camera as well as it looks good in the auditorium. And we have a special TV lighting person who comes in to help with that. We've got a couple who are very used to working here and working around the limitations of the extremely tight production schedules that we all have to work with. And they'll come in and they'll work with we have a camera that we rent for the season that stays up at the back of the auditorium, and they would have a good look at it and look at where the problem area is going to be. And they'll be given a little bit of time to work in advance on how all the parts fit together. We have that final rehearsal. Sometimes we have cameras out of that, sometimes we don't. It's not often these days. Again, the cost, we've got to be mindful of costs, particularly. And then we'll get to our first recording. And during that day, we've got we'll have the camera team come and set up the cameras in the auditorium. We normally have 6 to 8 cameras covering the show, and again, that's very much from our side of things a function of our auditorium. There are only certain places you can get things, and ideally you want to have the cameras as on eye line, but that means you can't really. There are only a limited number of places you can get those, and as a function of our auditorium, we've had to go down a particular technological route, which is very similar to sports. One of the jokes I often make is that we're a small-scale sports broadcaster. Ultimately, the technology is exactly the same. And we get all that out, and all of our stuff is pre-scripted. So what that means in terms of the camera shots, the director has gone through and worked out what they're going to do in advance. And we have everybody works to music scores, both for the ballet and the opera, and we'll have a music score. We actually have a camera pointing down at the music score, and it's distributed for everybody so they can see it, and that has all of the shot numbers in it. And we have a script supervisor who will call out those shots as we're going along. And the director actually, during the show, will just make notes and will occasionally call bits and pieces. It's a lot different to maybe if you've heard something from sports or something like that. If you've heard any of what's referred to as production talkback, tends to be incredibly busy on that. And ours is actually relatively quiet. You'll hear the script supervisor just calling the shots out as it goes and what comes up next. From that side of things, we'll go through and we'll do that for first recording, and we'll record the output of every camera. And we've got those then for if we then subsequently post-produce it. On the sound side of things, it's a similar kind of thing. We put our microphones out in the pit. Sadly, we can't keep them out all the time because we've got probably 4 different shows on at any one time, and all the pit setups are different. So we have to go and rig it every time. And if we've got that orchestral rehearsal in the afternoon, it's a tight rig. We can get an entire pit rig done in about 20 minutes if we have to. We do try and avoid it if we can. But we'll have probably somewhere 30 to 40 microphones in the pit. We've got a number that sit around the auditorium as well. They generally stay rigged. And generally for cinema, we're mixing in 5.1 surround. So you've got the 3 speakers at the front behind the screen and the surround speakers. You might just see 1 or 2 of them floating around in here. And that gives you at least a sense of space. And that's really what we can do for cinema. If we're doing for Radio 3, radio is stereo. So that's where we're at for that. Some interesting sort of parts. We actually have microphones out for the ballet to pick up the dancers on the stage. Dancers wear a special type of shoe, or the lady dancers wear a special type of shoe called a point shoe, and you can hear those thumping on the stage as they're up on their toes. If we don't have those microphones, it actually sounds rather distant. And you can sort of hear it, but it actually separates the sound from what you see on the big screen. And we found that it doesn't really work. So we have special microphones for that. Obviously, for operas, we've got singers. And so we do put radio mics on the singers. In the auditorium, they don't generally amplify things. For the singers, there are the occasions where we do, and those tend to be stuff that where we've got the operas have dialogue in them as opposed to sung. Sung dialogue is called recitative, for quite common in sort of Mozart operas and stuff like that. We don't amplify that. But the spoken if there is spoken dialogue in certain bits, sometimes we give them we get requested to help out. So we have a team of people who will hide radio mics on people. They're freelance for us, and they're wonderful. I can't say enough about them. If you ever have to do one of these, get people in to do these. They will make your life infinitely easier as a sound engineer. We've been doing this for 15 years, and we've got a really wonderful team here who we generally freelancers who we bring in and help out, and they will work with the costume teams. They work with the wigs teams to be able to hide the microphone so that you will never see them. They're there, but we also have to deal with the fact that singers move. Much as we'd like them to be bolted down onto the stage from a sound point of view, possibly not from the pictures point of view, is that as they move, the sound travels relatively slowly. And so we've got some microphones on the front of the stage that sound rather ambient, but give you center space. And you've got the microphone that's usually on the singer's ear, just over the ear, or up here, depending on what wig or what hair they've got. Unfortunately, if you've got hair like mine, or getting a bit thin on top, it might have to go on the costume. We try to avoid that because as you move your head, the level on your microphone changes. So we do try and avoid that if we can. But sadly, bald people are a thing, and we have to work around it. So we have to work with the fact that you'll hear the sound from the radio microphone first, and then the sound from the microphone. So we actually have people adjusting the delay times on those radio mics to work with the stage mics, and that's usually somebody's job on their own. So we usually have a sound team of 3 people. In terms of the production side of the gallery team, 3 to 4 people, and then you have separate people who you've got camera operators. They only do the zoom and focus and point it in the right direction. And then we have a separate set, usually 2 people who look after actually doing the exposure and the color balance of the cameras to make them all look as close as they can. Obviously, the lighting person, the TV lighting person, is also involved in this, and they'll quite often be just calling down notes to the vision team, saying, "Oh, during this bit, we were about the exposure is set on f stops, so f2 is pretty much wide open and lets as much light into the camera as you can, and then when it's super bright, you might be down at f12 or something like that, which means that there's a tiny little pinhole that's letting the light through at the front of it, and so less light gets let into the camera. And so they'll call down notes to the vision team to say this lighting change is coming up. We can hear output of where all the lighting cues are coming through, and say, and during the rehearsal we were at f6 or something like that. We'll work through all of that. We'll get that first recording out the way. Sometimes it goes really well, and we get some really great stuff. And sometimes there are always going to be things that need tweaking and changing. So we'll then go back over it. For the cinema side, we'll quite often go and watch it on a big screen in a cinema. Because watching it on a screen a bit like the one behind me is great, but it's not the same as seeing it on something that's huge. And the costume team will be involved. The wigs team will come along. The lighting team will come along as well, and they'll all take notes on bits and pieces on those elements. And we'll then go and make some tweaks. And then when we come to the live cinema day, the sound team also then get a day to go and rehearse through all the bits and pieces. For the ballets, it's usually not too much. For the operas, that can be pretty tricky. Unfortunately, again, we're here to observe. We can't gently say to people, can you not stand quite so close to each other, because acting and things like that are important. And if you've got a radio mic here and the person next to you has got a radio mic there, you might well be louder in their radio mic than you are in your own. So we've got to work a way around this. We have to work out how we're going to fade things up, how we're going to deal with things, where people are coming on and off stage, all of those elements. And we'll know some of that in advance, but some of it we're going to have to just work through. So we'll rehearse it again. And then we get to the live cinema day. And it's quite similar for Radio 3, just without the pictures. We have an opportunity in the morning to go send the sound team to go and have a listen down in a local cinema. So they'll go and have a listen over the satellite. We'll play out some bits and pieces, and they'll go and make some tweaks, because cinemas do sound slightly different to a room like I'm currently in. And so they'll make some tweaks, make some changes. We then have some rehearsal with presenters. We have usually one presenter for the operas and two presenters for the ballets. They'll go through there. We'll have some pre-recorded material that we'll play in, that's usually like a bit of an introduction to the show, and maybe something that's peripherally, something that the RBO have been working on, and some trailers and a few other bits and pieces. So we'll go through and rehearse all of that in the afternoon. The camera crew will have gone through what is called camera notes. They'll go through the script for that evening as well. And then we get to live, and we do this live. There is about a 3 or 4 second delay between it leaving us and it hitting the cinema, and we run it as a show. It's as much a performance for us as it is for everybody, for the performers on stage. We've got the script, we're working to it, but things go wrong. Usually not too badly wrong, but they do go wrong from time to time. And we do the live performance, and hopefully everybody enjoys it. And then subsequently, we'll then potentially post-produce a number of those. We have, as I mentioned during the intro, we have our own streaming platform. So we'll post-produce those, and those will go off. The cinemas have a commercial. There's a commercial agreement. I think it's about 3 months afterwards. We can then put them up there, and people can hopefully enjoy them subsequently. That gives you a sort of a flavour and overview. For our sort of education ones, we're in a dance studio. And we don't get access to that until 5 o'clock in the evening, and then we're live at 7:30. So it's the whole thing just condensed down into a very, very tight timescale. So we get used to working very, very short timescales. The nice thing is here we've invested quite a lot of money over the last few years. We do a lot of this, and the cinemas bring in some money. We've invested money in updating our facilities to make doing these things easier. And this now means we can just plug a camera up and be up and ready to run within 20-30 minutes, and start that presentation rehearsal for the insights, or start those things. It means that we can do these things at a relatively short timescale. There's a lot of planning involved, but we can actually get things up and running. Spaces, despite the building being absolutely enormous, space is always at a premium in here, and everybody's always fighting for rehearsal space because we've got so many shows going on. So the whole thing is a bit of a negotiation between everybody going, I need to be able to get in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and people going, no, we have a team of people who do scheduling. And they are probably the most harangued people in the world, bless them. They're really lovely. But it is a lot of work to try and build a place running this complicated. That's probably enough of me yakking on about things. I'd love to be able to hand this over to questions and ask anything that of interest, really.
Thanks so much, Mark. So does anybody have any specific questions for Mark about his route into his career, about his day-to-day work, about what he finds exciting, challenging about the work that he does? Feel free to type them in the chat, or pop your hand up and you can vocalize a question. I'm going to start us off, Mark, just by saying, what's the best thing about your job? What do you like most about your job?
For me, it's always been about the music. I love working in music. I'm a terrible musician myself, but I've loved working in music, and my whole career has been very fortunate that I've been able to work at Royal Ballet Dance Company and here, and I get to listen to great music every day, or at least most days. I haven't had much today. I've been in meetings all day, which has been very dull. But I get to listen to some great music. We've got wonderful musicians here. We've got a great orchestra. We have some of the best singers in the world. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a massive opera fan, but that's okay. I mean, but I've been here for 19 years. It can't have been that bad. But I love working in music. That's really been the most exciting part for me. And I've been along with the journey from the beginning for cinemas and for broadcast here from the Royal Opera House. And it's just a sort of part of the scenery now, I suppose.
Fantastic. We've got another, there's a couple of questions in the chat now. One, it tags on nicely to what you most enjoy, is from Anay, who said, hope I've said your name correctly. What are your typical working hours slash days?
So I know, and if we haven't got a show on, generally sort of 9 to 5, 10 to 6. We tend to be fairly reasonably flexible in terms of, I mean, I've got a young family, so having that little bit of flexibility means I can go and pick my son up from school. But generally that during the week, we have at the moment it's slightly quieter. So I mean, I had an insight event earlier this week, so those are normally sort of 10 till 9 in the evening. A full show day would be 10 in the morning till 11 in the evening. Hopefully we don't get too many of those in one week. It does happen. Our hours are averaged over the whole season or the whole year. We try and it's an average 42.5 hour week for us, but some weeks are going to be longer, some weeks are going to be shorter, and it's just dependent on what we're doing.
Yeah, right. And we just a little bit of plugging here that we do have an apprentice in your department. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
We do.
But they work on average 42.5 hours a week.
Yeah.
So it's it's a busy working week. Some weeks are harder than others, aren't they? Obviously.
Very much so, yeah.
Going on. We've got some really good questions coming in, so I'm just going to try and take them in order, or I'll lose my
Please
place.
do, yeah.
The first of all, just out of curiosity, Amber says, how much of the Ballet and Opera House's business comes from broadcast as opposed to ticket sales? That's a really interesting question.
Interesting one. I don't know the exact answer to this, but in terms of we've slightly reduced the numbers that we're doing at the present moment in terms of the actual number of shows. Pre-COVID, more people saw our shows in cinemas over the course of, we used to do about 12 a year. More people would see it in cinemas than would see it in the house over the whole year. Which was quite an impressive thing. I think we're not far off of that still, even though we're doing about somewhere between 8 and 10 a year at the moment. In terms of revenue, it's not it's a proportion. The costs of filming are quite high, and so I mean, I probably can't give away any too many numbers in terms of things, but it's not cheap. Let's put it that way. There is a high cost to do it. The satellite costs money. Cinemas, it goes out to around about 1,000 cinemas a night live, and so we'll get a proportion of that. The ticket sales come back. It goes through a distributor. They obviously take a percentage, and we get a proportion of that back. It does make a small profit over the course of the year, but we need quite a lot of people to run it and things. So overall, it's just about breaks even. Compared to ticket sales, it's probably not a huge amount. We're only doing 12, 8 to 10 a year at the present moment in time. So, but it is part of it.
Yeah, and I guess the important thing is that we've got it captured, so it can have a revenue in DVD sales or
Absolutely.
in streaming, if anyone has DVDs anymore, or on our streaming platform beyond, yeah.
Exactly that. There is some revenue that people are still interested in stuff we filmed 15 years ago, and there are rights agreements that go with all of those kind of elements. But it's also from the point of view we're as the Royal Ballet and Opera. We don't really do touring in the UK. There are other companies that do that. But we are an Arts Council funded company, so everybody does contribute to running this place, even through tax and bits and pieces. I mean, it only makes up a ever decreasing amount of our income, but it is there. And so, if you don't live in London, the costs of coming to London and buying a ticket and staying overnight and things, get pretty expensive. And one of the things is, a lot of people who really enjoy this stuff, quite a lot of them get into it later in life and bits and pieces. So, actually being able to send it out to cinemas, and it's not just the chain cinemas. It should be noted. We do a lot of stuff goes out to village halls and school halls and all kinds of bits and pieces, what we refer to as community cinemas, and we get some lovely feedback from them of like 20 people from. We remember we first started this years and years ago, and it in a place in absolutely the back end of Scotland somewhere, and they were just like, we're so grateful that we can see this and share it with our friends. And it's like, if we don't make any money off it, it's not the end of the world, but it's great that we can get it out there and people have the opportunities to see some of the what hopefully some of the best opera and ballet that you can do. Obviously I'm very biased, I work here, so
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Mark. We've got one here from Esme who says, what is the most popular way slash which gains the most benefit? TV, cinema, radio? I imagine that's talking about our broadcast, what's most beneficial to us. Or
Um,
is it talking about careers, Esme? You might be able to clarify, but we'll go in with what's
I'll
best.
go. I'll go with the sort of commercial side of things. For
Yeah,
us, cinema, easy.
yeah.
Uh, Cinema brings in some money. Radio 3 has been a partnership that's been going since I've seen tapes from the 1950s. When it was the third program, we do have a massive archive here of all kinds of stuff, and I've recovered some stuff from the late 1950s. So we've been doing stuff with what's now Radio 3, BBC Radio 3, for a long, long, long time, and that brings in people. Their listenership is perfectly reasonable, and it probably reaches about the same kind of number as the cinema. We don't make a lot of money off of that, but it's, again, it's kind of more an access side of things. The streaming platform is starting to take off. We've been doing that a couple of years now, and we're getting a decent, we have a reasonable number of subscribers and bits and pieces, but it is a slowly building part. DVD, that's sort of picking up the sort of DVD and Blu-ray stuff that's sort of falling off of a cliff. TVs used to be a bit of a part of ours. There seems to be at the moment less appetite from BBC TV was our sort of main broadcaster partner in the UK. There's a bit of a they're not the sort of classical music part. They do the proms, they do a number of other bits and pieces, and there isn't a lot else at the moment. There's a lot of when you've worked in broadcasting for a while, you kind of get used to the sort of groundswell of the way that the industry is going, and we're always trying to get stuff out on other platforms. We have stuff go out on Sky Arts. European broadcasters as well do take something. It's not a huge part of what we do, though.
Yeah, right. There's a question from Mia, but Mia, hold your fire. I'm gonna put you at the end, because not at the very end, but like towards the end, because it will follow on nicely into me plugging some apprenticeship work. But so Samuel says, what's the biggest change that's happened in broadcasting while you've worked at the Opera House? That's a nice one.
Oh, good question. In terms of the technology side of things, we're going through a big change at the present moment in time. Things are migrating really for the way that we work hasn't really changed. It has to fit around the way that the building works. So ultimately that kind of hasn't changed that much. The technology in behind the scenes is really where a lot of the change is, and keeping up with that is a big challenge. It's a big part of my job. So these days, rather than there being direct analog audio connections and direct video connections and bits and pieces, it's all starting to head down the computer network route. So that's a big change for all of us who've worked in this for, I mean, in my case, 20 something years. It's a new thing that we're having to learn. It's a new way of working. It's opening up some really great, interesting opportunities because we're such a massive building and we've got stuff all over the place. The sound, video, and broadcast team, of which I'm a member, we're one of the few departments that actually has stuff all over the building. And just things like paging speakers and stuff. I mean, there's 1,500 paging speakers in the building. That's how mad this place is. And we have to go and refurbish those because they've been in for 25 years, and we're not quite sure how long they're going to last. They were well built, and they've done really well. But the paging system is literally the way that the building pretty much functions. We reckon somewhere around about 4 million pages have been made since the system was built, and so the building was last redeveloped 25 years ago. We've got a big kind of changeover process going on with a sort of renewals process, which is not really assisted by the fact that we've been told we're not allowed to close. Basically ever. So we have to do this while we're doing shows as well, and lighting are having the same thing, everybody else is having the same thing. So because if we close the numbers are astronomical in terms of the
what
losses.
we lose per night is
so
crazy, isn't it?
it is absolutely crazy. So we've got to keep doing shows, and so we've refurbished this room that I'm currently in. We refurbished this summer. just gone. The other sound room we did the previous summer, 5 years ago, we did the TV gallery, and they'll be coming around for renewal in the TV gallery in probably about 7 years or so. And so there's sort of a continuous change process, and just keeping up with that and keeping up with the technological changes being the real kind of thing as things go has been the real challenge.
And would you say that we have the sort of the technology you have is the cutting edge? I mean, we're pretty advanced, aren't we?
We're pretty good. We're not quite at the bleeding edge, which is probably a good thing.
Yes.
As I mentioned, it is a relatively small team,
Yeah.
and we've got we're able to do most of the things that people have heard of. So ultra high definition, we can do high dynamic range stuff, although cinemas can't take it. We can do Dolby Atmos. We can do all of the shinies.
Right.
It's a case of is there a business case for doing those? Is there money to be made? Is it worth doing it? Is it worth the extra cost of doing it? But technologically, we're certainly keeping up, just about. But it's not to say that you couldn't do couldn't do it at a much smaller scale. Obviously, ours is built around the fact that we have to work around the ridiculous schedule, and we're looking to try and do it. But there's no reason to say that for other that won't necessarily be the case for somewhere else. Or you can rent it all in, or there are plenty of other options. There are, outside, as I mentioned, we're a small, we always say we're a small scale sports broadcaster. There are, companies, outside broadcast companies that do that do those things and can supply that equipment. So it doesn't have, that kind of investment. And for most companies, it wouldn't make sense. Unfortunately, we're right in the centre of London, and parking anything outside outside the Opera House is a bit of a challenge, because the only place we can park it is right in front of a bunch of shops, and they get really cross with us because we have to close the roads. The business case wasn't difficult when we put it in. It is, it just costs an absolute fortune. So from our point of view, it made sense to do it here.
Fantastic, thank you. Great insights into I'm learning things as well here. So there's a couple more questions. Amber, I'm going to say, so Amber just sort of finished off her previous question by saying, so the purpose of the broadcast is more about accessibility than revenue. And absolutely, Amber, that's really what Mark explained. Yeah, fantastic. And then Esme said, in general, how many people work at the Opera House? So I can tell you, I sit in HR, that there are over 1,000 permanent members of staff, but then there are at least 1,000, possibly more, other members of staff that are brought in on casual basis, or sort of when we have, the opera singers aren't permanently with us. The chorus are, but that casts are brought in, special musicians might be brought in for various things. And then a lot of our stage teams are made up of permanent staff and casual staff. So the staffing of the building fluctuates depending on how busy we are. How many are in your team, Mark?
So we've got 11, I think it's 11 full-time members of staff, but we have this season for us has been really, really, really busy. We've had a number of really big shows in. A lot of them, we also deal with anything that's got video content projected or video wall or anything like that. Yep. And we've had a lot of that in the autumn. So it's been really busy. We've had a really, really busy autumn through to the winter. It's sort of calmed down a little bit at the moment, but then we've got some new shows coming up in the next couple of months that are going to be really busy as well. So, and we've a lot of other work going on around the side. We have all the maintenance of keeping all of these things running. We have pat testing. We have all that kind of stuff that has to happen in the background. So, on average, there's usually at least a couple of casuals in roughly full time a week, and it can go up quite a long way. I think one week in the autumn, I think we had the equivalent of an extra 8 full-time members of staff in. Okay. It was really busy. So it varies a lot. And then on top of that, most of the broadcast industry is freelance. That's the kind of pretty much how it works. So while we've got myself and Lizzie, who are the two sort of permanent members of staff, Lizzie primarily looks after the audio side. I primarily look after the sort of management side. I generally will have a couple of people, plus then the directors freelance, the vision mixers freelance, the script supervisors freelance, all the camera crew are freelance, the music mix engineers freelance, the music producers freelance. There's usually sort of 20 to 30 people working on a broadcast for a filmed one. Radio 3 supply all of they're generally their internal staff, but we work with them. and so it varies quite a lot.
Yeah, it is something like that.
Yeah. Oh, someone's just unmuted themselves. Can you make sure you're all on?
A quick survey for us, if you don't mind, just based on service.
There we go, just muting whoever that was. Just final one then was from Mia, who's held on hopefully to hear, how can I get into a career like this? We've got 2 minutes. Just can I do a plug for apprenticeships at our RBO?
Go for it.
So Mark might mention that he has an apprentice in his team, a sound, video and broadcast apprentice, and they started in September. So they've got another year to go before this time next year, if you're interested in an apprenticeship in sound, video and broadcast and you're 18 or over and you don't already have a degree, then please apply this time next year. But at the moment we have 3 creative venue technician apprenticeship vacancies and a automation and flies technician apprentice vacancy that have just gone out because it is National Apprenticeship Week this week. Big whoops. How else, what other routes are there? Can you tell us in 1 minute, Mark, before we get kicked out of this call?
Go for it. We'll see what we can get in. So a lot of my team have a really varied selection of things. A number of people have come through the apprenticeship scheme. Dan, who is dealing with projects for us at the present moment in time, he was a sound, video and broadcast apprentice back in about 2015. Holly, who has just joined us, she was an apprentice as well. We've got people who, on the sound side of things, there's a course from at Guildford University called the Tonmeister course. A couple of people have come through that route. We've had a couple of people come through from college. We've had people who started on stage and as casual and have developed an interest in sound, and we've ended up using them because I mean, it's a giant building and finding your way around is a nightmare, and actually that's half the challenge more than anything. So sometimes is actually having people who know the building and know the people that work here, because it's so busy, it can be a real challenge. People apply for jobs as they come up. Casual work we're always looking for casuals in terms of just having people on the books. Yes, it isn't permanent. Yes, it is very, very variable. And so, but it's usually a good way of sort of, again, learning the building, learning the people, learning how the place works, because it is a little bit, it's not very similar to many other theatres in the UK, just because of that schedule. So there are various ways of doing it, and all of us I'm the only person who's come from from the hardcore engineering side, I suppose. There's no sort of real kind of this is the way that you can do it, but there are lots of opportunities. The things I would say is learn to read. If you're interested in this, learn to read music. You will need that as a sound, video, broadcast, anything along those lines. Definitely going to need that, and learn the technology as best you can. You'll never know all of it. I've been doing it 20 years. I definitely don't know all of it. But to see what you can learn and get experience. All theatre experience is good experience.
Yes, theatre experience, local music venues, anything like that you can try your hand, by getting like bits of work experience. Do get in touch with us if you're 18 or over and you'd like to do work experience. You can go to our work experience page and fill out a form and tell us what you would like to do work experience in. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. We've gone a minute over, but
oh no.
Thanks everyone for coming along this afternoon, well, good luck with the sound, video or broadcast careers. Thank you.
Thank you all.